we don't really think about it too much, but before citrus, grapes were promoted very heavily as a crop. There was a guy up in Altoona, North Lake County, Dr. Demko, and Dr. Demko was a big proponent of grapes, and we had a couple wineries in Lake County in the 30s, and so grapes were a bigger industry in the 30s in Lake County than citrus was.
But what happened to them?
Well, they finally realized that they couldn't compete with New York State or California, and
I thought it was the Mediterranean fruit fly.
I don't know if medfly wiped the grapes out or not.
It did.
Did it? Now I know that they couldn't grow the vinifera grapes that they grow in
no,
Europe.
They're all
all they do is the muscadines.
That's right. And, I've never understood that. They pretty much physically have the same exterior characteristics as far as the thickness of the skin of the grape and all. You would think that if you could grow a table grape in California, why can't those poor crackers grow it? But
Pierce's disease. You can't grow the vinifera grapes in Florida because the sharpshooter transmits the Pierce's disease, and Pierce's disease is basically greening in grapes.
Okay.
And so you plant a vinifera grape in Florida, and it won't be long before the Pierce's disease, a bacterium, wipes it out. So
of the seedless grape, but not the muscadine.
Not the muscadines. They're tolerant to the bacteria.
Of course, our wild muscadines don't fruit well.
Well, we've got some grapes that muscadines have been here for a long time, and you can the winery up in Claremont, Lake Ridge Winery, they make a pretty decent wine from some muscadines, but and we have a few bunch grapes that we can grow in Florida, but the real pressure was on the grape breeders to come up with a seedless bunch grape. Mm-hmm. And poor old Dr. Mortensen at Leesburg was just trying his best. He released Orlando seedless, but it wasn't a very good quality grape and had some seeds in it. So anyway, are you ready to go?
Oh yeah, I've started, so I can take some of that stuff that
you guys. You're taping this now?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll just go ahead then.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So it's not surprising that you had people starting to grow grapes, because grapes have been grown for centuries, obviously, and so we thought we could grow them. When I came to Lake County in 1968, Minute Maid had 10 acres of grapes that they were growing in Montverde area, and we had some grapes that were around, and we still have some muscadines. So how'd you get in the citrus business after the grapes went bad and your dad rescued as much of the property as possible?
Some time just before the war, he and his father bought a grove in Lake Garfield in Alturas, and that's where it all started. My father, but then, was still driving a truck. He hauled citrus north. He hauled a lot of during the war. Hauled a lot of explosives. They hauled citrus north and then dropped back somehow or another and picked up from wherever it was that Hercules made powder in Georgia out of our lighter stumps, and hauled it to I think Chevy Chase, Maryland. And
so he was in the citrus and munitions business. Huh?
Well, somewhat for a while, and he has. For that time, he was fairly large into there. He had 3 or 4 trucks on the road,
yeah.
Long distance trucks, and they were all refrigerated, which meant they had a putt engine up in the front nose of the trailer, and they went by ice plants, and they pumped ice into the front of the trailers, and then the little squirrel cage fans blew the cool air back through the trailers. This was refrigeration, what they call refrigeration, still when I was young, and Jim was young, not as young.
Not as young. Now, I've done a lot of interviews with folks, Dudley, and one thing that seems to be common is that from an early age, if your family was involved in citrus, you became involved in citrus. What are some of your earliest memories of the citrus industry? Were you on the end of a hoe? Were you picking fruit, or what were you doing?
When I was 12 years old, I was oil spraying, sitting on a tractor seat all summer long at 1 mile an hour.
Handgun?
No, we had
sprayer?
a 30. They called them 36s. It was the old FMC 36, which meant it had a 36-inch fan. The first sprayer I remember my father having had a wooden fan, which I've still got the fan, and a man actually sat in between the tank to work the valves.
Okay. So this was actually an air blast sprayer.
Air blast?
As opposed to a handgun, the old
Yes.
Prescott boom they had on the back of some of
Yeah.
these sprayers.
No, this was a true, had a Hercules engine, and
Cypress wood tank or a metal tank?
no, it was a metal tank.
Metal tank. And so you were putting out summer oil spray.
Summer oil spray. It'd take us, well, by that time we probably had 120 or 40 acres of grove, but by the time you worked on it half a day and then sprayed half a day and then worked on it the next half a day, that it was sorry equipment back then.
Yeah.
Of course, it was not new when he got it. It was all old used stuff that he was trying to make do.
Yeah.
And his philosophy was to, if you had enough money to get a decent piece of equipment, you had enough money to make a down payment on another orange grove or a piece of dirt to plant an orange grove. So I went through a good portion of my life with not real good equipment.
So you were a part-time spray applicator, part-time mechanic, trying to keep the equipment running and going then.
That's pretty much the truth. I think most everybody, family operations were like that then.
Yeah, I think that unless you've been involved in the industry or involved in something like that, you don't realize that probably the most important person in the whole operation is the mechanic, because if you can't keep that equipment going,
That's very true.
You're not going to be productive at all.
And unfortunately today, a mechanic, there is no such thing, because the sophisticated equipment it takes to diagnose what's wrong, you can't afford it. So you've got to go to the local dealership or whatever.
Well, nowadays the mechanic has become the information technology person that can run all the computers and all that kind of equipment that takes place there.
But the majority of the acreage that was salvaged by my father at Hesperides, he was able to start planting in 1955 or 56 in small amounts. It had no irrigation. He had C. Wilson dig, who was a contractor here, dig with a drag line, a water hole, for us to be able to get water in supply trucks. And we had one really good supply truck and one that wasn't really good. And these blocks were 60, 80 acre blocks. And we ran that water truck day and night, 7 days a week. My wife was pregnant with our first child or two and rode with me a lot of weekends just before we'd have time to be together.
And when you weren't spraying, that truck was probably used to water young trees.
That's all that truck did during that period of time, was setting those trees out, because that's old coarse ball bearing sand out there, and that water didn't stay there very long. But that's the way it grew. And he would not spend money he didn't have to put in a well. It would have made him a lot of money to have done it, but he didn't do it that way.
So you grew up spraying, and then you just moved in and helped your dad look after the groves. And did you then take over when he retired?
He never retired.
Oh, that's
No.
he was one of those guys that had to be working. You know, that work ethic is developed. You just can't turn it off and on, can you? If you've been
Well, he had a wonderful brother that could tolerate him. Father was a hard man to be around, and we took very little time off because it was sometimes when you came back, some of your help would be gone. And he didn't think that there was anything but work. If you were going to get any pleasure in life, it was going to be from what you were doing. And it was either do it his way or the highway. And I've got no regrets whatsoever. He was hard, and he was difficult to deal with, but he was a good person, and we grew from very little to quite a bit.
So his philosophy, as you said earlier, rather than buying a new piece of equipment, let's buy a little bit more land and plant some growth.
That's pretty much it. If you're going to spend money on anything, it'd be on dirt.
Well, how many acres did you finally end up with in the family? You started with a couple of blocks and gradually grew?
It was all gradual, quite gradual.
Did you buy existing groves, or did you buy raw land and plant trees?
Both.
Both?
Yeah, most of the groves he bought were groves that were on the market and nobody else wanted.
Okay.
And they were close to home, and it worked. When we started moving ahead was when we did finally plant that grove that on that Hesperides property, and it started coming into production. And through the freezes of the 80s, it's cold out there, but for some reason, the cold was worse this way than it was in the Alturas area than it was out that way. So we came through that reasonably well. Both sides of my family have always loved animals, and we've had cattle forever. And he had picked up a little bit of land in Alturas that it was just a hobby farm sort of deal. But the International Minerals, when they came our way with the mining the phosphate, they paid us a healthy amount for that, which let us expand our cattle operation into South Florida. So we did that by that time it was labor for doing citrus was very difficult, as it always has been.
Yep.
And anyway, we made the decision that a family could round up a few cows but can't pick many oranges.
So you became diversified.
We became diversified. Now there's not near as much money in cows as there is in an acre of orange grove, but it's a wonder. Both of them are wonderful ways of life, but we like cows.
Now, you can talk about history in terms of people and events, and you mentioned the freezes. Freezes obviously had an impact on groves in your situation. Also, if you were just getting into the business pretty good when we made the evolution from all fresh fruit into juice fruit. What was that transition like? I mean, when you had another market now, did you continue to grow fresh fruit, or did y'all make the move into?
We never grew fresh fruit. Some of the old groves he bought would have a few acres of tangerines or whatever. No, we thought that'd be the way to go, is try to get a home. And he had an opportunity to buy some stock in Alturas Packing Company. And he did. And we found out pretty quick that they wanted to come pack Putnam's fruit when the market crashed. And everybody else that had been in the company for a long time, they waited till we didn't stay there very long. So that was one of life's experiences.
Now, were y'all cash fruit sellers, or did you participate with on a processor?
No bank. Well, we have always we've never shopped around much. Back then, most of our fruit went to Kraft. Quite a bit to Evans in Dade City, Evans Packing Company. And then we had a lot of dealings with Bowen Brothers in Winter Haven. They were wonderful people. And then we had the opportunity, we saw in one of the newspapers where Florida Natural was taking on a new $1 million member. They wanted 100,000 box growers. So we got involved with them in that, and before long we asked if we could anyway, we ended up putting all of our fruit to Florida Natural, and we're still there, and they're wonderful people.
Look at the transition that's just taken place within processing plants. When you started, with processing industry, it was Florida grown and Florida controlled, and now Florida Natural's the only one that's a Florida owned processor that's left in the state. Kind of an evolution has taken place.
Very sad.
Yeah. So it's difficult, at least for us, to look at it. What has happened? I was talking on the way over here. I started in 1968 in Lake and Orange County, and in 1980, Lake County produced over twice what the state of Florida grew last year. And so it's just been a difficult thing to see. And as you drive around, what you remember as groves are now subdivisions.
Well, we had friends. We had friends up that way, and I felt so sorry for them being so devastated by the freezes of the 80s. And what in the world were they going to do? And within 5 years, it was all rooftops.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid that's what's happening here.
Yeah, it's kind of slowly tipping away. When citrus growers are making money, they weren't as interested in selling. But the next generation, when all of a sudden the freezes wiped your groves out, and quite truthfully, not very many of them put away money expecting to have to replant. Mm-hmm. So the transition took place. All right, I'm going to talk to this guy for a second. We kind of have your history. Although you didn't comment, you said that both your parents had a little bit different background. Where'd your mother come from? What was her?
They're old Southern family.
Now, who came into Madison County? Was that your mother's family?
The Langfords, yes.
Yeah. And so did your parents meet out in West Florida?
No. My mother, you're probably not at all familiar with it, but in Lake Garfield, there is a Lake Annie, and there was a community of black quarters and white quarters and a crate mill. This is before cardboard boxes and refrigerators and everything that was shipped were shipped in veneer crates where they took old Florida bay trees, I guess, and they could sew them so thin that and they wired it together anyway, and then packed it with newspaper or whatever in order to safely get appliances from A to Z without getting them all scratched up. And that's where they cut this crate mill. It was a crate mill. Mm-hmm. And there was a little lake there, and they had their own railroad, which was a lesser than standard gauge railroad, and it ran across our property to this day, and Jim's family property, and on into South Florida to bring that stuff into this little community of Lake Annie out here. And there was a little school, and Mr. Rue hired my mother as teacher and principal. My mother my family went to Cuba and owned a big piece of ranch land in Cuba. Well, I don't know what the Batista or what, anyway, something wiped them out and brought them back to Fort Myers. And anyway, my mother ended up in Polk County as a school teacher, and she taught for a while in Haines City and taught in Mulberry. And Mr. Rue, who owned the crepe mill, hired her to be principal and teacher over a 1 through 5 or 6 class at Lake Annie. And so that's where, somewhere in there is when my father and she met. And
so he started dating the school blonde, and the next thing you know,
well,
a
they
family's
married.
come along.
They ran off to Arcadia for what reason I don't know, and married. And he got on his truck and headed north. And they struggled a while. My grandmother had a grocery store here in Bartow for a long, long time, and they and eventually I was an only child. We lived with her for many years till time took care of that.
So you have a history with your parents and grandparents, and we got to talk about your son, because somewhere along the line he inherited all these genes. Is he the first member of your family that was interested in politics and getting in public service in that direction? Where'd that come from?
Came from Sally's family. Her father was very high up at the University of Florida in many things. He was an attorney. The Armory, Sally was 3 months old when he died of, I think, an appendicitis, but he was highly thought of and very outgoing, probably would have been very political. He was Spessard Holland's junior attorney under Governor Holland. And Sally's mother, they had it rough. And at some point, her mother went and clerked for either Spessard Holland or someone in that firm. When they went to Tallahassee, I'm getting things out of place that I am not real sure of there.
I understand. So did Adam had an interest in organizations and leadership as a young boy?
However, you can join 4-H, and Sally was always the 4-H leader after another dear friend of ours retired from being the 4-H leader. And I guess the first year he was in 4-H, they went to vote who was going to be the different officers of their little, it was the old Imperial Polk County Youth 4-H club. It was the old original county club, and they asked who would put your hand up if you'd like to be a candidate to run for the different offices. And nobody put their hand up to run for president, so Adam sticks his hand up. So he starts off running from age 10 or whatever, wherever you can join the 4-H club. Ended up 2 or 3 or 4 years later being state 4-H president, and of course went to the University of Florida and he rang the bell pretty much everywhere.
Rest is history, as they say. You know, it's kind of interesting, Dudley, that Adam started off in 4-H and ended up, in the political life. My wife grew up on a dairy, and 4-H was something she was involved with, and her vacations was a week at Camp Macquarie, and Kathleen ran a dairy. She went to Gainesville, got a degree in dairy science, ran a dairy till she finally realized that small dairies couldn't compete with the big ones. She got out of the dairy business, and before you know it, she's a county commissioner. So I guess that 4-H trains them, and they can move into public service easily.
You know, Kiwanis Club Rotary Club, 4-H Club, and all of them disappearing. Probably 4-H and FFA lesser than some of the other clubs, but they do so much good, and whether it's
Look
teaching people how
look
to
what-
stand up before other people.
Yeah, 4-H. You know, I'm partial. I was an extension agent for 38 years, and so 4-H is our baby. But look at the leadership it develops in kids. And you know, Adam raised his hand. He had no earthly idea that he had these leadership skills. But look what 4-H did in bringing it out. You
Yeah.
know, and has kids. So it's
Lot to that.
it's fantastic that what happens and the way things evolve and everything else. So Citrus was good to you and good to your family. Hard work though, hard work. I grew up in a city. I grew up in Orlando, and so I tell these growers that I associate with, I'm sorry that I didn't develop the same kind of character that you developed on the end of a hoe handle or pulling a sprayer, but from what I have gathered, you know, that work ethic stays with you. You just doesn't go away. And your dad worked hard all his life. You worked hard all your life, and your kids are going to work hard all their life. It's just something that gets passed down.
That's very true.
I want to go one quick direction. He's going to talk. He thinks he can get away with it, but you're going to talk. My good friend Henry Swanson, the county agent in Orange County, said, he said history is events and people, and we've talked about a lot of events. Tell me, when I say who are some of the most colorful folks you were involved with in the citrus business? What names kind of come to mind, and who do you remember as people that were memorable to you in the citrus business?
Some of them would be black hoe hands that I stood beside.
Like a brother,
in
right?
100 degree weather.
Yeah.
But some of them would be at the top of the list.
Yes.
Not all of them were black, but and I learned an awful lot. Ben Hill Griffin. Sally, who was it the other day? Are you there? I thought she was probably snooping.
Yeah, she didn't want to be drugged in here.
Oh, who was he died 20. The little guy wore a Stetson hat and had the loudest mouth.
Jim Griffith.
Jim Griffith.
Now, he was a bulldog, wasn't he?
He'd bite you with no reason to bite you. Yes. I never knew him that well, but I was a lot of association functions with him, and he always had the last word.
Yeah, he was a pot stirrer, wasn't he?
Mm-hmm.
My stall.
Did you know he was a professional ballroom dancer?
What?
He was a ballroom dancer. He and his wife were ballroom dancers. That was
Danced.
Oh.
Yeah.
No, I didn't know he'd let anybody get that close to him.
That was the biggest surprise when we interviewed him.
But he was a sharp little guy.
He was. He understood the industry. He knew where a lot of skeletons were buried, and but he also could work from both sides. I dealt with Jim quite a bit, especially toward the end of my career, and he had great insight. He knew what was going on and what was going on behind the scenes and everything else. And of course, Ben Hill was an institution. I served on the Citrus Hall of Fame selection committee. I started young. Henry Swanson was on there and asked me to take his place, but I can remember some of the older fellows, Red Phillips with Haines City, and Art Matthias, and Herb Mansfield, who was with DPI for years and years. And
My father was a dear friend of Art Matthias. They were on the State Farm Bureau board together.
Art was an institution. He was a production manager, and everybody kind of looked up to Art. And there were some a lot of colorful characters in the industry, you know, and we were just talking a little earlier about Gilbert Bowen. Did you know Gilbert?
I did. I knew him quite well.
He evidently he bought a lot of fruit. Did you ever sell any fruit to Gilbert?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Now, by the time we were dealing quite a bit with Bowen Brothers, Jim Shuford had in Gilbert's sister Arlene, Jim Shuford's wife, Gilbert's sister. Were running the show, and they were ran a lot. They handled a lot of fruit. I think that when they, you know, right there towards the end, they either bought or took over that processing plant in Auburndale, and I think that bit them pretty bad.
Yeah. Well, he was probably the largest bird dogger in the state for many years. Bowen Brothers, where it bought an awful lot of fruit. And back in those days, a lot of people were still in the cash market and were selling. They didn't want to wait 18 months for the co-op to pay them. They wanted their money up front. So a lot of people in the cash market then. All right, take a break. You're going to talk to me.
Okay.
This guy over here, Jim Ellis. Tell us, how did you get into citrus business? Dudley here was forced into it on the middle of a sprayer, putting out summer oil. How did you get in the citrus business?
My dad and mother came from Georgia to Florida. I was born in a wooden house in Alturas, Florida, in an orange grove. And the man that delivered me was Sally Putnam's great-grandfather, Dr. Hughes.
Grandfather.
Huh?
Grandfather.
Okay, you keep me straight on that. But he delivered me in a wooden house in an orange grove in Alturas, Florida. So I was born in an orange grove.
Now, was your dad managing that grove, or did he own the grove?
He owned the grove. It was a very small grove. My dad was a night watchman at a packing house, fresh fruit packing house, for many years. My mother packed fruit at the Lake Garfield Citrus Co-op packing house. So I've been surrounded with the word part of citrus all my life.
So, you know, and that's another thing. You don't really realize it, or people don't really realize it, how the packing house for many, many years was the heart of the cities. And many of the women were provided a second income. And the great thing about the packing house, they didn't open until after school started, and they usually closed before school was over. So mom could get the kids to school, go work, make some money, get home in time to take care of supper, and that was an extra income that made the difference.
Alturas one time had 3 fresh fruit packing houses. Connorsville, which was the next little community, had 1 packing house, fresh fruit, on the railroad track. Bartow, I don't know how many packing houses were. I can think of 3 packing houses one time in Bartow. So there were packing houses. Anywhere there was a railroad track, there would be a packing house.
Now weren't some of the packing houses actually built by the railroad?
Yes, they were. Some of them were built by the railroads, yes.
They wanted the volume and of business that
They wanted the business. Yeah. You get a community like Alturas. If they didn't have packing houses and people taking care of the groves, they wouldn't have anything. That was it.
They were the economic backbone of the community.
They were.
The dollars that were generated there ran the grocery store, the dentist, all the others that were involved. So you grew up in an orange grove. There was nothing but citrus for you as a young boy. Were you like Dudley? Did you get the opportunity to build character in a grove?
In the summer, as soon as school was out, I was hoeing an orange tree with a scuffle hoe, or carrying a water bucket to water the resets. Because when it got dry, we had again, the truck, we did have a truck would come through and the hose could spray. But I also remember we were carrying water in buckets and dumping it. We would put a ring around the tree and then dump that water, that bucket of water. So, and hoeing, pruning in the summertime, cutting the dead wood out from the freeze, or the lemon sprouts, which I don't know if people even know what a lemon sprout is, but we would have to prune those, cut them out.
Now, I guess for a while, it was a standard practice to remove the dead wood on the inside of the tree.
Yes.
And it really wasn't until the '62 freeze that there was a lot of pruning that went on. These trees got to be pretty good sized trees, didn't they?
After the '62 freeze, well, at the end of what we hand pruning. I don't know anybody today hand, maybe they do. But you do any pruning? Dead wood? No. I remember the first hedging I ever thought about. The tractors, they were either McCormick Deering or a Case. The trees grew together, and we'd put some field boxes on the back of a wooden trailer. The driver would start down through there, and we would reach and cut out enough for the tractor to go through. That was what I call the first hedging.
Yep.
DY might remember something before that, but we made a ring for the tractor to go through.
And then you took one of those big lemon sprouts that you cut and you tied that to the front of the tractor so you wouldn't get spider webs in you when you ran through the growth.
You had a lemon sprout in front of the tractor so it'd keep the spiders off of you. Yes.
So you had
these, what we're calling lemon sprouts, at that time, they call water sprouts.
Water sprout.
And the reason you cut out all those water sprouts, there was black scale, and you couldn't, with the sorry spray machinery we had at that time, if you didn't have a crew of men go through there and thin all of that kind of stuff out, you didn't have enough penetration with your spray machines to get the spray through the trees to totally cover up with oil spray and whatever else they use, parathon probably.
Yeah.
So it required thinning those trees out some.
Those water sprouts were very vigorous, and they and if you let them go, and the fruit they produced wasn't all that good a quality
Well,
either.
it was old inside fruit.
Yeah,
That's
it's hard to
right.
get a hold of. Yeah. So you had so much fun in the Grove, you decided to pursue your education further. You went to Florida Southern?
After I got back from Korea, I applied for the GI Bill, which paid me I started off at I think $115 a month. I got married and they paid me $135. So I know a wife was worth $25. I have proof of that. That's what she was worth for me.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you testified to the fact that she was worth something anyway.
She'd be happy to hear that.
Yes, after I got back from Korea, I did go to Florida Southern and went straight through summers and all, and I graduated in 1960, I think. Yeah, 1960.
And so, what was your first job in the citrus, your first paying job in the citrus business?
Beside a scuffle, my first paying job was I got a field man for Polk County for Florida Citrus Mutual. Bob Rutledge was the general manager. And Arthur Bissett from Winter Haven was retiring. So Bob hired me to be the field man for Polk County in 1960.
So you started with Florida Citrus Mutual.
Started with Florida Citrus Mutual.
Well, you probably could tell us some pretty good stories about Bob Rutledge.
There was a very interesting man. I said he was a P.T. Barnum.
Yep.
He was able to holler and get things done. I remember we had the freeze. I guess it was the freeze of '62. And I went by Winter Haven and picked Winter Haven CGA and picked up a bag of fruit that they were shipping. I carried it to Bob's desk and laid it down, and juice was coming out. Bob had his secretary call Homer Hooks at the DOC, and he says, Homer, God damn it, we're going to shut this industry down. The commission had not voted an embargo. That was the days of embargo. He said, we're going to shut this industry down. And they did have the meeting and declared an embargo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that being a field man, though, that gave you a tremendous opportunity to meet a large number of
Yes,
of
all
growers.
over the state.
Well, who are some of the more colorful ones you met? Obviously, Rutledge has got to be at the top of your list. They don't come any more colorful than
Some
Bob
of
Rutledge.
it had to be Ben Hill Griffin, Red Phillips at Haines City. He was general manager of Haines City. Red was quite a colorful spokesperson. Art Mathia.
I don't see colorful in your contacts. To who?
Do what?
Use your phone.
Your phone.
He's listening to you.
To do
So
that, you'll need to be online.
I don't know how to shut that damn thing off.
We've moved to an electronic age now where these things dominate it. Dudley and I were talking about the mechanic, and now the person that can make that thing work, who, by the way, are grandchildren, right? I mean, I don't know how to do this thing, so they are born with some innate ability that they understand how these things operate, and I can give it to my grandson, and in 2 minutes, he's got it done so that
I understand.
my wife's calendar is now on my calendar, so I know where she's going. She can't slip away. So, after Mutual, what enticed you to leave Florida Citrus Mutual and move into the industry? You were
My dad's brother managed the Lake Garfield Citrus Co-op for, I don't know, 30 years, I think. And he asked me to come and train under him. And I did go to the Lake Garfield Citrus Co-op, and when he retired, after he had retired and his brother who followed that, he retired, I became the manager of the Lake Garfield Citrus Co-op.
now. Did the co-op look after groves as well as run a packing house?
The groves, the member had, my dad's brother had a caretaking company for tractors and sprayers. So he did some of the growers. Some of the growers, like Lake Garfield Nursery, they did their own caretaking. Mr. Ware from Ledley Ware, he did his own, had his tractors, he took care of his own growth. So some of the growers took care of their own, some of them let the caretaker take care of it.
But the co-op then you ran the packing house, and that was
The co-op ran the packing house. All the processed fruit went to Florida Natural, Citrus World. The fresh fruit was sold through Seal Sweet in Tampa, all the fresh fruit. So fresh fruit was Seal Sweet. The processed fruit all went to Florida Natural.
And when was this? You started with Mutual in the early 60s,
1960.
And so when you moved to Lake Garfield?
Oh, I'd say in the 70s, early 70s.
Okay.
I was with Mutual 5 years,
Okay.
and then I went to the packing house.
Were you at Lake Garfield when the freezes came through?
Yes.
What was that like, trying to operate a packing house with
Well,
damaged fruit out there?
it's tough.
Yeah.
Back then, the Citrus Commission would declare an embargo on fresh fruit. So we could not ship fresh fruit after a certain date. Till that term expired, we could not ship fresh fruit. It was frozen. It would melt before you get it to market. So
Yeah, the challenge was to get it in a can before it completely rotted
you
on the
could do
ground.
that at the plant. We could get it to the plant and they could squeeze it. Yes.
Now, did the freezes finally put Lake Garfield out of business, or did you survive the freezes, or what
The
happened?
freezes finally took us out. Our growers became smaller and smaller. None of our growers went south. They were all pretty well frost-proof was about as far as we went. North up to maybe the county line. So we died from just shrinking up, the growers.
Okay. And so then from there, did you go to the Department of Ag?
I sold spray material for a while. fertilizer spray material, then went to the Department of Ag.
And you were in charge of the fruit and vegetable inspection division.
With fruit and vegetable, yes. We handled, I had a secretary, we handled all the licensing of fruit dealers. They would make the application with the Department of Citrus. Once it was approved by the Department of Citrus, then we issued the license. That's the way the government works.
And if you were to be a licensed fruit dealer, you had to go through this process.
Yes.
And that, therefore, if I bought fruit, if I sold fruit to a licensed fruit dealer and they didn't pay, I would go to you and you would.
You could file a complaint. Yes, you could file a complaint with the Department of Ag to help you get some money.
Okay.
If they had any money left. If they bankrupted, of course, there's no money there.
Right. And there was no law that said you had to sell to a licensed fruit dealer. I mean, it wasn't required. If you were a grower and you could sell to anybody, but you would be silly to sell it to
He could sell it who he wants to.
Right. But most everybody.
Work through a licensed fruit dealer. Yes.
Okay. Where did you develop this interest in the history of the industry and start collecting citrus crate labels?
I don't know, something one day hit me that the label we were putting on boxes was beautiful. I mean, it was a work of art. So I went upstairs where our labels were and then any salesman that came through trying to sell me something, whatever, food and machinery or whoever, they found out I was doing it, and they would bring labels. So the labels came from all over.
Now, in talking to people in the past, Jim, there was a really good working relationship between packing houses and so forth. That if one packing house had an order for tangerines and they didn't have enough fruit to fill it, they could call on a neighbor packing house and say, "Can you help me fill this order?" And they would ship you a bunch of labels to put their label on the fruit that you packed. Did Lake Garfield do that? Did you pack other people's fruit for them during shortages and so forth?
Well, we belong to Seal Sweet, the Florida Citrus Exchange. So everything was done, fresh fruit was done through the exchange, who had a sales department. And they did the selling of the fruit, our fresh fruit.
Yep. But so you started reaching out and getting labels, and the more labels you got, then I guess you started looking into the history and where they came from and that kind of a thing. And it's a story that's been told time and time again about the crate labels, and like you said, they're beautiful works of art.
They're works of art.
And they're avid collectors that have them out there. And you were generous enough to donate your collection to Florida Southern College to share them with folks now. So how many labels did you actually end up with by the time you finally?
I don't know, and I don't want to know.
More than 2 or 3, I'm sure.
Several hundred, yes. Yeah.
Well, they show up in unusual places, and of course, the stories behind the labels, are fascinating. And
there's international collectors. One of the early ones was a man from Holland. Somehow he wanted labels. I sent him labels, he sent me labels, so we had some exchange of international labels. Yeah.
And early on, it was basically collectors. This wasn't you weren't in this thing to buy and sell labels. And there are a couple other label collectors that I've dealt with, Jerry Chacon and Colin Cruz, and they're not in it to make money. They're in it just for the enjoyment of having the labels and the stories that go along with them.
I had fun with it. Yeah.
I always enjoy sitting down with Colin, and of course he's up in Leesburg, and so he'll have early Hurlong label. Well, this one was here, and then they went to here, and then you have the label, and he sold out over here, and it went from Pine Island Fruit Company to Micheloni, and then Micheloni sold it to Carter, and so the same label
Same label.
has 3 or 4 different owners as
Yeah.
it transitions
Yeah,
through.
it was.
And then there are great family stories like the Simpsons have Roxy, and that was Howard's dog, and then of course there's Kids, and there's some labels now that aren't going to be politically correct to put on signs out there, but anyway, they
Well, the like the Mammy label.
yeah, that was
and,
Hurlong's label. Right?
There was a black man, brother and sister that,
Yeah, from Waverly.
yes, those labels are hanging in the Grove House in Lake Wales, but beautiful. I mean, there's nothing racist about them.
Well,
I've
the one
got
word,
several Mammy labels.
the one black word that we don't like to use,
Right,
there was a label
Yeah.
with that name on it.
right,
I did not know that.
yeah.
Yep, there it is.
Well, it's a different world, and but labels were early advertising, and I'm glad that people recognize this and did some collection. So we have so many rich stories to tell, so many interesting people that are out there in the industry, and I remember Brenda and I went and talked to Bobby McCowan, and we asked him to relate a funny story or something that happened, and he told us about an event at a board meeting that he still remembers. So, are there, you organized and ran the No Names, a group of citrus growers here. What are some of the stories that you remember? Some of the things that kind of stick in your mind in the citrus business.
Well, one on about we shipped from Lake Garfield. Our number one label was Breakfast Bell, and I shipped to Winston-Salem, North Carolina, to the Putmans and Irvin for almost 100 years. Breakfast Bell.
And that was Lake Garfield's
That
label?
was Lake Garfield's label. Breakfast Bell was Lake Garfield's label. Well, one evening, the boys finishing up a load of fruit needed some more cartons to go on it. They picked up a Breakfast Bell box, or a few boxes, put on the end of the truck to go to another man in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. The next morning, I got a phone call from Putman and Irvin, very upset. You don't ship Breakfast Bell to him. I said, no, sir, we don't. Well, you did. I flew up immediately to talk with the owners and assure them that that was a mistake and it would not happen again. But, boy, they were some kind of upset.
Well, that just demonstrates the value of the label, right? They knew that if it had Breakfast Bell on it, it was going to be quality fruit because they'd always gotten quality fruit with that label.
That was their label. That was theirs, not their their competitor down the street. Yeah.
Well, I know that there are a lot of stories like that out there, and we've explored just some of them. And is there anything you want to share with us about citrus? We talked about Florida Southern College. Tell us a little bit about your experience with Southern and the students that were there. They're scattered throughout the industry now. So when you started in the late 50s, how long had Southern been having a citrus program? Do you know? We talked about that.
I'm going to have to look that up.
Yeah.
I don't know how long, but it was several years.
But at that time there were only 2 schools that offered a program in citrus, right? University of Florida had theirs, and Southern had
That's
theirs.
correct.
Mr. Lyle retired shortly after we were there
Yeah. Yeah.
You're a Southern man as well?
for a little while.
For a little while. We have a little competition, of course. There's still some UF guys around, but I think that the Southern guys probably outnumber them now. Of course, it's difficult to run a program when you have very few students. Now the kids that go, they got a degree in economics. You got to learn how to handle the money. Well, growing citrus is easy, making money is the hard part. So they end up going in that direction. But you were talking about 100 people in the program at one time.
Yeah, I said 100. I may have been a little bit off of that. It was in the 60s. Was the total number of students we had at that time in the department.
But a sound department, a sound program, and a lot of kids that went there, and being in the citrus business, a lot of guys could go there and still work. Billy's dad wouldn't let him get off that easy by skipping away to school and not having to work. So, yeah.
No, it wasn't that. I never was a student.
You were academically challenged.
I was. I still am.
I know the feeling.
No, it was a wonderful experience, but it was a point in time in my life where I was ready to get married and make things happen. And sitting in the classroom had nothing to do with what I wanted to do.
Didn't excite you, did it?
Didn't excite me, and I went off in my direction.
Well, obviously it did produce a failure. You managed to survive somehow, even though you.
Well, I've been blessed.
Even though you couldn't keep up with Ellis over here,
That's
who
right.
became a dynamo in the industry.
You're so right there.
How long have y'all known each other?
I don't know.
Y'all.
Well, when we were at Southern,
Okay,
is
so-
when I first knew.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
I
probably
knew of him, but when
Yeah.
we all carpooled, and Sally was carpooled with them, and she graduated from Florida Southern. She was at Florida State, and I was going to Erskine, which is a little Presbyterian school in South Carolina. Just having the time of to this day, the time of my life.
What,
I
a
was
citrus
a
tree at
wild-
100 miles, wasn't
No,
it?
sir, and I was a wild Indian. And
One quick story at Southern. Bob Pipping was teaching a marketing class in the mornings, like Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And Bob called me. I was taking the marketing class. Bob called me one evening. He says, "I've got to be on the river in the morning on a naval deal. I'm going to close it. I want you to do the class for me." Oh, well, that's fine. I wasn't going to tell the professor I couldn't do the. I walked into class. The guys are all sitting there, and I said, "Well, what would you like to go over today?" One boy says, "The cafeteria."
A true intellectual.
Yeah. Oh.
Well, and there were some. We're going to tell the Southern story, and obviously the Florida Citrus Hall of Fame has a relationship with Southern now, and we have our wall there, and archives and collections, and doing these oral histories and a website and everything else, and so it's nice. It's a way that we can preserve some things, and there's some great oral histories that we've done. There's some great information that's there, and we just need to keep telling the story and getting the word out there. And you guys have shared with us, and I'm ready to wrap up unless you got something burning that you need to tell us. And I know you're proud of your son, probably all of your kids and everything else, but he's done you proud, and he has been a true friend of the citrus industry. I'm honored. I was inducted into the Hall of Fame the same time that he was, and so
Really?
it's great. I know there's so many stories that we can tell. When I quit or retired from the Extension Service, I worked for the Research Coordinating Council, which was a kind of an offshoot of the Department of Citrus, started by your good buddy Jim Griffith, and we go to Washington to try to get some research work done. And having lunch. I would have lunch with Adam every year. He would come to the Hall of Fame for our induction. But going up to Washington, I was really impressed when we went to visit. He was so focused and sat there like this, absorbed every word we said, was in tune to everything else. I marvel, how could that, and then I'm sure that when we left, the next group that came in was on a topic couldn't be any further away than what we were talking about, and he was still locked into that, having to process all that. Just
Well, he's rather an amazing young man.
how's he liking ducking it?
Who would not like shooting birds every day all over North America? No, he travels an unbelievable amount of time. He associates with some of the wealthiest, good people,
Conservationists, yeah.
And who could be better than a tree-hugging rich person
That's right.
that's wanting to save the wetlands for the ducks? And
Yeah. Well, you know, the majority of people don't realize how many private citizens are key in conservation.
Mhm.
You know, just in Florida, if it wasn't for the ranchers, probably Florida Panthers probably would have been gone a long time ago. The state of Florida isn't going to protect the panther. It's the ranchers and the landowners that are instituting, conservation practices that allow them to survive and move. And I'm sure it's the same way with wildfowl habitat and so
well, in this past week, there's been a big write-up on how the habitat is disappearing for the land tortoise, the gopher tortoise, and it's true. It's sad. Farmers hate them, ranchers hate them. They'll cripple a horse. They'll stop you and kill you on a tractor if you hit a hole just right. And they're just a wonderful creature of God's that we're running, taking every little place on this planet away from them. And but they're there. We protect them. We might hate them, but building contractors where they go in on these large acreages and clear them and all and just bury the poor creatures. It's
Well, there's a lot of dynamics that are going on now, and it was interesting back when citrus was king. It was so much simpler, and I can only imagine, if you were a county commissioner and a large part of your revenue came from the citrus groves, you didn't have to worry all that much because citrus was very non-demanding on government. I mean, they put in clay platforms or loading areas to load up fruit, and you might have a couple of deputies that you could call on once in a while if you needed to, but there wasn't a citrus tree that went to school or checked out a book in the library or did any of that kind of stuff. And so now the dynamics have changed, and hopefully we'll come up with a solution to greening. We thought all along that freezes were our number one problem, but we've realized now that a disease is what's doing us in. And I would have never thought that we couldn't have found an answer to it with all the brilliant minds that we have out there. But we don't know what'll happen, where we're going. But for us, it's been a damn good ride, hasn't it? Citrus has been.
It's been a wonderful way to live.
It's been a great deal, and I tell this story all the time that I would go and do career days at middle schools, and went one year, and last period of the day, this young lady was sitting up front, looked like she could go work for a bank. She had dressed up in sixth grader or seventh grade or whatever. And my first question always is, what's agriculture? What's citrus? And the kids would always say, it's driving a tractor or anything else. So I asked it, and she raised her hand, and I called on her. She said, it's a way of life. It's kind of took me back, but it has been a way of life for you and your family, and for you and your family. And sadly, that way of life is kind of slipping away. We don't have as many people involved with it. And
Well, that simple way of life has won wars and fed families and provided housewives with a relatively small amount of her dollar to spend for food, which is changing rapidly. And we've lost our workforce.
well, yeah, undoubtedly the efficiency of the American farmer has allowed for our quality of life to be enhanced. You know, it wasn't that long ago when it took half of us to feed the other half.
That's it.
And now there's a very small percentage that are feeding everybody. So that frees up these other people to provide these wonderful gadgets that we live by now and all the fine things that we have. But
You know what's so sad? There's no way for a young person to think they can own a piece of land. There's no way in agriculture that you can work yourself into. You can lease a piece of land or you inherit it, but as far as going out and putting an operation together with the equipment and the cost of equipment and insurance and everything that's involved, along with the cost of land, which is unbelievably expensive. It's just, and if you can't have the opportunity to own it, why would you work that hard?
it's a challenge. You know, it sure is to do that. And if you aren't fortunate enough to have a family that's got that initial investment for you, to start from scratch is very difficult. And yeah, we lived in a golden time. I was fortunate enough, and all of us got to be involved with and interact with remarkable people,
Amen.
all the way from, I say, you know, from the experience of having someone shoulder to shoulder with you when you're hoeing trees. And one of the more enjoyable days that I had in my job was that we had what we called an equipment operator school. And every day we'd bring in, every year we'd have a day where equipment guys would come in and we'd train them. And that was an exciting day. But they'd have lunch and then we'd have some competition in the afternoon. And I would go to Grove Care operations and I'd see these guys and they'd ask me, how are we doing, what's this and what's going on? And you know, we don't really realize how integral a part they were to getting things done. The guys that drove the tractors and put out the pesticides and did all that. And it was an industry that was close. And you know, I can't imagine other industries where growers would sit down and share secrets, quote, but they, you know, somebody asks you, how are you controlling black scale this year? What are you doing? You're not going to say, oh, that's a proprietary issue. I'm not going to talk about that. No, you're talking with, I tried this and it didn't work, but we went to doing this and found it to be a lot more successful. And so there was a camaraderie between growers and packers and everything else. It was a good time. It was a good time.